Well, hello everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and it's Monday night, so that means it's Monday night with McDuff and Nixon. Garland Nixon, so nice to have you back here. And well, we had a little chat on Twitter, and it seems like we got a whole lot of stuff to talk about today. I'm looking forward to it as always. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great. Yeah, looking forward to it. Definitely looking forward to hanging out with our money. Oh, I've got to get my I don't have my comments up. I like to see the comments because all of our friends join in.
Yeah, the comments are great. And we should take a little time at the end of the show and check, for people who might want to have a question or two. You and I usually tend to keep going. I mean, we're just going, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there we go.
The time just flies by on us.
Yes. Well, let's dive into something. Where do you want to start?
Well, there's a term that I heard from an international security analyst, and it really grabbed me, right? Because nowadays, when you look, there's all these terms. People are trying to figure out what's going on. So if you're on the left, you call it neoliberalism. If you're on the right, you may use the word globalism. People are trying to define, you know what I mean? Trying to find a word to define what's going on here, because whatever it is, it's not working very well for the average person. And people want to name it. And the thing about it is, I find that people want to find a name for it, oftentimes to associate it with something that they don't like. You know what I mean? If they already don't like anything, they need like a name to associate it so they'll feel good about where they are. And the term that I heard was ultra liberalism, right? The guy, and he was basically referring to, like a Justin Trudeau in Canada, your Obamas, your Biden, of course, your Theresa May's, Macron's, you know what I mean? These types, right? The ultra liberalists. Because as you and I talked about, there was a time when the word liberal was just kind of an average person. You had conservatives and you had, people that were called liberal, but it was just kind of a regular old person, right? And now these Bidens, the Obamas, et cetera, there's something different. There's something really, really different. And it's the globalists, neoliberals, whatever. And I'm using the word ultra liberalism because it's almost like a form of, not almost, it's like fascism. There really are some elements of fascism in what's going on. And I think if you pay attention to our government, you start to see there are elements. I'm not saying it's just a fascist government, but the elements are really starting to show up of that. And so you've got people who are playing the liberal card. Okay. Yes, I'm liberal. I'm for the rights of everybody and helping everybody and the downtrodden, blah, 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 right? Human rights, okay? Okay, that's great. Everybody should be. That's wonderful, right? But what I say about the ultra liberalism is it's all just a fraud. And that's like fascism. A fascist will borrow from the far left. A fascist leader, he'll borrow from the right, the left, the middle, wherever. A fascist leader is going to say whatever he needs to say. And so he'll borrow from anywhere. He's never going to be really left or right. He's authoritarian and he wants to be in charge of fascist government, right? And that's what I see from the ultra liberals. They borrow from the right, borrow from the left, you know what I mean? But in reality, are you for human rights if you're starving an entire countries full of people? Like, and I know we can't talk about certain countries, but there are certain countries that are things that are going on right now. I don't know if we can talk about it or not, but where people look at the United States and they say, you're not being fair here. So these people are so-called liberals, but if you look at their record on liberal things like human rights, they're abysmal. They're vicious warmongers with this smile on their face that I'm Joe Nice liberal. And that's why I call it an ultra liberalism. It's a false liberal, a faux liberalism that covers this fascist beast underneath of it that just wants to go around the world killing people and stealing all of their stuff and demonizing any leader of any country that won't go along with what they say. But we're nice. We're here with a rainbow flag. We got a Black Lives Matter mask. We got all of these things to put on a facade that we're here to help the little guy or the downtrodden or the minority. But when you look at what we're doing around the world, we're killing these people and we're stealing their country, their goods, and we're overthrowing their government, and we're just doing horrible things. And that's what I mean. It's a fascist version of liberalism, which is an ultra liberalism. People will use the term when they're talking to right-wing fascists. Oftentimes what they'll say is ultra nationalism when they're talking about right-wing fascism. Well, for the thing, I'm going to call it ultra liberalism, because it's not even left. It's a faux centrist liberalism. Who knows what the hell? I don't know. You see what I'm getting at?
Well, yeah, but I want to parse this down, because I love this question of language and the way you first phrased it. And let's start back there. When you said that, people on the right would maybe call it globalism.
Mm-hmm.
People on the left would call it neoliberalism.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know that term neoliberalism, but I don't follow much that people on the left are doing anymore. I'm sorry to say. So, what does neoliberalism mean? And obviously, it's something that's different from what you're calling the ultra liberalism. I'd like to see where this goes.
Right. So I'll put it like this: the same person that you'd call a globalist, the person on the left will call that person a neoliberal. You know what I mean? Macron.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah. The Macron, Trudeau, Biden is a neo. You know what I mean? And let me say this. And well, I don't have to tell you, Mitch McConnell's a neoliberal. And wouldn't you argue that he's a globalist?
Of course, yeah.
Right. So the term liberal doesn't really mean liberal. Basically, it means the same thing as globalist. People that they want to obliterate all borders, so they obliterate all democracy, so they don't have to answer to any laws in any country. They can just go around the world and do whatever they want. Then when they come to the country, they say to the country, austerity on the people. Whatever the people are having, you have to cut that back. Whatever salaries you're paying your state or federal employees, you got to cut that. Cut everything for the people, and suck all the money out in rent. I mean, they go to literal countries. I put it like this. Perfect example. Hunter Biden, a perfect example of globalism and neoliberalism, right? They overthrow a country. They go in there. Their kids go in, and they pillage the money. Did you know this? Recently, I've been reading people, Alexander Mercouris did, and I'll finish up with this. Alexander Mercouris did a nice piece about Tony Blinken going into Ukraine. Perfect example. Alexander Mercouris, that piece where he talked about it, and he had some of the things that were said, some of the stuff linked out. And basically, Blinken went to him and said, you have to do certain reforms. One of them was allow foreigners. Now, keep in mind, Ukraine, like Russia, like China, a lot of these countries will have one or two big companies that are owned by the government and helps to finance the government, right? And usually, like Ukraine, it's a big naphtha gas. It's a gas, whatchamacallit, right? So basically, there was a guy on there that was crooked. The president felt he was crooked and threw him off. Tony Blinken said he has to go back on the board because he's friendly to the U.S. And all these gigantic state-owned companies that Ukraine has, you got to put an American on them. You got to put a foreigner on the board of your companies in your country. So basically, what he's saying now is, we're coming in. We want you to open up the gates. We're going to come in. We're going to take all your money. And when we're done, you're no value to us. And I tell you why it is. They put them on the border so they could kind of menace Russia. You know what I mean? So they could threaten Russia. So it's like, we're going to take over Ukraine and we're going to have all these troops. Let me know if I'm running too long, but this is important stuff. The U.S. was like, we're going to overthrow the government of Ukraine, and we're going to like put some troops, Ukrainian troops, on the Russian border, and we're going to threaten the Russians. So they put like 30,000 troops in there, so-called calling the bluff, and Russians bluff. The Russians put 100,000 troops, 7,000 tanks. I mean, just people that could overrun them, and they had to back down. Here's my point. The Ukraine is of no value to Biden and those people anymore. Its value was, we can use it to menace Russia. Now that Russia called their bluff, Ukraine's no value to them anymore as far as strategic to hassle Russia. So what's Blinken do? He comes in and he basically says, your big companies, you got to put our boys on it. It's a mafia. He's shakedown. You got to put our guys on your companies. They're going to go in just like Hunter Biden do, and they're going to drain those companies dry. That's globalism. That's neoliberalism. And don't believe that the Democrats are going to do it and there ain't going to be many Republican in there. That's the game they play. So that's a good example. That's one of many examples of of the neo, whatever you want to call them, globalist, neoliberalism, neoconservatism. It's all one stripe.
That's a terrific help to me to talk to people, because I didn't know that I could communicate, with people on the left by just saying neoliberalism instead of globalism. Because I think when they hear globalism, they start thinking, oh, this is a conspiracy theory.
Well, they just don't use the term. But I mean, it doesn't hit home like, neoliberal. Yeah, that's a guy I can't stand.
Yeah. And who would use the term neoliberal like that? Just to, I mean,
if I'll put it like this. Let's say you go to, are you familiar with Jimmy Dore show?
A little bit.
He's going to use it all the time.
Okay,
He's a guy that would constantly use the word neoliberal. Yeah. Guess what? Tulsi Gabbard, somebody who I thought the world of. I was supporting Tulsi Gabbard for a long time. I was planning on voting for Tulsi Gabbard. I really liked her, and that's a term she'd use.
Mm-hmm.
I went to when she announced. I went to Hawaii, and went to the in Honolulu, the Waikiki whatever beach hotel where she announced it. I went to Hawaii, and I got like a picture where I was here and she was a little bit over from me. But I really liked her. But she would use that term. I don't know if you thought about Tulsi Gabbard. I thought she was wonderful.
Well, yeah, I need to do more study. I am concerned about the connections she has, I think, with the CFR, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't want to try to defend any things that I haven't really studied. So,
well, here's one thing I would say, John. They used every means necessary to destroy her. Every newspaper, when she was so anti-war, every newspaper, everything they could. That tells you what you need to know. You know what I mean? When the whole machine comes out to destroy a politician, that's a politician you probably should look at, because they're afraid of her. They were scared to death of her because she was anti-war, because she was in the military and she didn't believe, that the troops should be over in all these countries.
I like it. And I really do want a candidate. So I'll put some time into studying Tulsi Gabbard more. Thank you for that. So yeah, language can help us cross these barriers we need to cross, because the false idea that it's Republicans and Democrats anymore, that doesn't fly anymore. We have to have a kind of a us against the globalists mentality, or us against the neoliberals, because they're taking over. This is the descent of a totalitarian control system upon the citizens of this country, and maybe maybe we were ready for it. Maybe we're going to say, oh, this is, and now I'm going to feel secure. There's police is going to have some smart dust on everybody, and they're going to know where everybody is. So, there's nobody going to sneak up on anybody anymore.
Guess what? Cell phones, they got it already.
They got it already.
I get an email once a month from Google, and it says, here's basically Google a map of everywhere you were with your cell phone. Anytime, if you've got Android, anytime you can go on your Google page and you can see everywhere you went, everywhere that phone went.
Wow. Did you surprise yourself?
No, never surprised myself. Every time I looked at it, I could always say, oh, I remember I was here. And so did they. Oh, by the way, someone asked a question. Neoliberal, what's the difference between that and a neoconservative? Here's what I would say, and this is an oversimplification, but this makes sense. Neoconservative, as generally used in reference to foreign policy, in particularly military or asymmetric warfare, such as sanctions, things like that. So the neoconservative is considered the military and the aggressive part of the globalist agenda. Right. So they go out, they overthrow countries, they screw everything up, they, cause complete mayhem because they overthrow countries. And then we fight each other over the stuff that they do. They overthrow here's a perfect example of this. Europe. How did the whole migrant crisis start in Europe? a bunch of Syrians. Do you remember all of those boats from Syria coming over? And they were the picture of the little Syrian boy on the beach in whatever country it was. It was horrible, right? What happened? The U.S. started trying to overthrow Syria, and 2 million Syrians ran for Europe. What else happened? They overthrew Libya, which was considered the gateway. They overthrew Libya, and Gaddafi told him, he says, you know, if you overthrow this country, I got a border. There ain't no borders to stop you. The migrants are coming. They overthrew him anyway. And what happened? There's no, if the Syrian border is not secure, there's no way to stop a mass migration. And they go into their countries and bomb the crap out of them too. So what the neoconservative, which is a military wing, either they're sanctioning countries that they're trying to overthrow, or they're bombing the crap out of other countries. They overthrow the country, screw these countries up. They go up and bomb them. And what happens? All the people who are running from the wars and the disaster and the famine that they cause come running into Europe, and you got a migrant crisis. And the people in Europe are like, hey, what about all these migrants? We're mad. Well, how did what did that migrant crisis just happen out of nowhere? Did all the migrants just wake up and go, you know, we kind of like it here in our country, but I think we're gonna all put our stuff on our back and walk 4,000 miles? No, I'm being exaggerated. Sometimes it's 1,000, but at any rate, no. These guys go in, bomb the crap out of their country, overthrow things, steal all the oil, whatever, screw it all up, and they're running from armed gangs and you know, armed strongmen in every direction, getting kidnapped or what have you, because we have totally destabilized an entire region. And those people come running in to Europe, and people look at the migrants and they're mad, but they don't realize something. These people just uncorked the bottle for all the migrants to come in. And nobody looks at them and says, you guys, look, you did this. This was the natural order of things. If I'm in a neighborhood and you're in the next neighborhood and you come in and they drop bombs and burn my neighborhood, I'm running for yours.
This is the old thing, the same old scheme, though. When you started describing the immigrants going into Europe, what I'm thinking is, well, this is a tactic to destroy Europe. But it reminds me of what they did in order to get to Vietnam, to destroy Vietnam, which was the CIA with Ed Lansdale, the infamous special operations guy, got the Navy to provide transportation for, I don't remember, it was like a million or so of North Vietnamese people that had nothing to do with the culture of South Vietnam whatsoever, but to transport them down into South Vietnam and just dump them off the ships to fend for themselves. And that is a migrant crisis imposed upon the people of South Vietnam by the Americans, specifically by the intelligence agencies, which are the ones that are running this stuff now, in my opinion. It's the same thing, and it's a method. It's not like, oops, we just spilled a bunch of immigrants into Europe, we're sorry. It's like, yeah, this is really going to destabilize Europe, and that's what we really want.
Okay, now I'm going to give you an absolutely alternate theory. Now, I'm not saying your theory is wrong. I'm just saying as a scientific argument, that theory one is that this is their plan and this is what they're trying to do, and they're going to do this in the long term, right? So yeah. I'll give an alternate theory, right? The alternate theory would be like the guy John Ralston saw, his book is called Voltaire's Bastards, talking about the technocrats, which again would be really, if you look at what he's saying, neoliberals. So let me give you an alternate plan. It has been said about these people, if you go to a chess tournament, you can always recognize them. They're the ones with an aggressive opening strategy and nothing else after that, right? One possibility is that they're like devious, and this is a devious strategy, and they're executing it exactly, clinically, perfectly executing. Another completely alternate strategy is that they are totally freaking incompetent. And just like when they live in this world, like when Dick Cheney, when they said, hey, look, what happens if we invade Iraq and it goes to hell? And he says, I can't see that happening. And that's pure technocrats. They create something and they say, this is the way it's going to turn out. And then they believe it. Another perfect example, Hillary Clinton people talk about technocrats and neoliberals were globalists, whatever. You can't get any worse than Hillary Clinton. And there were people calling from like Michigan and Wisconsin saying to the Clinton people, look, we need lawn signs. We need people to come out and knock on doors. We need people on the ground. We're losing here. And Hillary said, people said, no, we've got a computer model here in Brooklyn. And the computer model says we're going to win. Right? They didn't win. But they believe the computer model because they're incompetent. They truly think that they're so much smarter than everybody. It's almost like, you remember that old cartoon, hi, I'm Wile E. Coyote, super genius. And he would like give the Roadrunner a card that said super genius, and Roadrunner would just outsmart him constantly because he was an idiot. That's, and I'm not saying your theory or my theory is right. I'm saying either of them could be right. But I think it's also possible that they execute stuff, they believe it's going to happen, and it goes to hell. And they're like, oh boy. But they're never going to say that went to hell. They're like, well, okay, now we have to do it this way. I mean, because if you look at Wall Street, I mean, they don't think past the next quarter. It's like, okay, you know what? How now these day traders, they don't think past the end of the day. Their world, their time is getting smaller and smaller. That hourglass is so small you can't sit anymore. And I think that's part of their problem. They don't think anything through, and they try to deal with it. But let me change it. They don't worry about having to deal with it. We deal with it. We pay for their wars. We pay for their screw ups. We pay for everything. When there's an immigrant crisis, we have to deal with the day-to-day immigrant crisis. They're in guarded neighborhoods with whatever, you know what I mean? And that's not an anti-immigrant. I'm saying they just feel like whatever we screw up, it don't matter. We'll go to our private island if it gets bad. Or, I saw during the COVID, one of these guys was like off the coast of the Maldives the whole time. No, the Canary Islands in his yacht. They ain't worried about us. So that's another thought, that it's incompetency as opposed to competency. I don't know which one of those is, but I suspect it's one of the two.
Well, I can't say I know which one it is either. I think it's great to speculate about it. I have been overwhelmed with the idea of depopulation. In I guess it's been about a year now that I've been studying it from the book by Jim Mars, and the whole idea of eugenics that was created in the 19th century by the crazy British Malthus and the Fabian Society and H.G. Wells and all those people that really decided that, hey, the world is not going to be able to bear all the people that are going to come along from just the general general tendency of people to multiply, and there's not going to be enough food, and there's not going to be enough wood for the fires, and there's not going to be enough supplies, and it's going to be a terrible disaster unless we do something. And so they developed a bunch of strategies to start depopulating the world, and so that I throw in the mix also. That while yes, they can just say, okay, we're going to destroy Syria, and wherever the refugees go, we don't really care. But it also does fit in with my idea that they're destroying countries and civilizations so as to cut out the competition and rule everything themselves. I don't know. It's a fascinating way to look at it. Like, okay, they really are just a bunch of really, really rich people that are really, really stupid. And I think also really, really paranoid. We could probably throw that in there too. Everything I've read about the Rockefellers, for instance, indicates that they are scared to death of crowds and having people spying on them and that kind of thing, like Howard Hughes, as you hear about legendary paranoia of that very wealthy guy. So, yeah, and we're talking about people that live in a different world from us, and we have to try to suss them out. Very good. I enjoyed looking at it from your point of view. Anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll put it this way. I don't think they're in the normally way we put it is they're not stupid in that. Let me put it this way. what has happened is, and like that's why I said that book by John Ralston Saul, Voltaire's Bastards really talks about it. Is they've created this class, and you know what I mean. That this
Mhm.
class of people, and they're not all real millionaires. There's a class of people who feel like they know everything. That's why I say this ultra liberalism. You see it right now. It's the Biden, the Clinton, Obama, all of these Harris, etc. Right? And Ed McConnell and all of his group. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that think seems like our Congress, both parties are a joke, and it's like they know everything and we're idiots. So whatever, and they come up with these ideas thinking that this is going to, this is how the world works. The world doesn't work that way, and just things bash and fall apart to show how incompetent these. Let me give you an example of how incompetent they are. And it's just the things they do now are almost farcical. So under the Trump administration, they decided they were going to try to overthrow Venezuela. So apparently they got this flock of morons, from Florida, and they didn't have pay them, and this was Bolton and his people, right? And they get 60 guys and they put them on boats. Think about this. We're talking about a country. They get 60 of these mercenaries. They put them on boats in Colombia. They're now going to go 60 people with guns, mercenaries. They're going to go ashore in Venezuela, make their way into the capital, where they're going to get into wherever the president's palace is and kidnap him. That was their plan. The U.S. government was behind that. That was their plan. The nickname for the plan now is because it was so insane. They call it the Bay of Piglets, right? The Bay of Piglets is what it's called. Operation Gideon, and it's also the Bay of Piglets. Think about this. What country, a nation with a legitimate army, 60 schmucks are going to get on boats and go ashore, and they're just going to walk right. It's not, nobody's going to try to stop them. They're just going to wander right ashore, and off they'll go and find okay. They didn't make it ashore. They were captured by fishermen. They were literally, you got to know Venezuela. I've been there. And a lot of people that live in they call themselves militias. They consider themselves part of the military, and they'll have a little gray. You see the soldiers have green uniforms on. And the people in the militia, it's like a desert tan army suit, right?
Okay.
So local fishermen who happened to be in a militia saw some boats with some strangers on it. They went and got their guns. They went out. They got a little firefight. They killed a couple of them. They captured the rest. These guys didn't make it to shore, let alone get to the government. They were literally captured by fishermen. So my point is, Bolton and his people really intended to overthrow the country, and look what they did. These people are so. And I mean, I wouldn't want them to be successful at all. I think every country should chart their own course. But I'm just saying, so my point, that I use that as evidence. I submit that as Exhibit A, that these people are so incompetent that it's unbearable. And I think there was another one they tried. There was a second one they tried where they had these small drones, like remote control drones, and the president of Venezuela was giving a speech, and they were going to fly into the stadium and then get over the stage and blow them up. And they flew in the stadium, and they just took their guns and shot them down, and nothing happened. The level of incompetence is beyond belief of our government. Well, at least I'm glad they're incompetent in overthrowing governments.
I don't know, man. I wonder if those 8 guys weren't a bunch of operatives that had gone bad, and they wanted to get rid of them, so they just sent them on a suicide, this crazy mission.
Yeah, 60. It was 60 of them.
Oh, 60 of them. Oh,
60 of them. Yeah.
That's crazy, though. I mean, you're right. It is. It's inexplicable. I can't explain it. It's
60
funny,
people, a country of 30 million people, and 60 guys are going to go make their way to the presidential palace and overthrow the president. Really? That's a brilliant plan.
Oh, that's wild. I've been studying my dad's career. He was a counterinsurgency planner for the Pentagon, and he that kind of thing was his specialty. So it's just laughable that things have gotten so bad that they would mess up like this. He was brought in after the Bay of Pigs,
right?
So looks like they need to bring in some guys to clean up after the Bay of Pigs.
Well, Let's be glad that they are incompetent at that.
Oh man. Well, it
That's the way
doesn't
I
bode
look at
well
it.
for
Let's
us
be
though
glad.
if we do get into a war.
Well, you
Well,
know what I wonder too? Let's talk about this a little bit. When I said ultra liberalism, neoliberalism, globalism, whatever. The other thing about it is it gets to the point where everything it does is bad. It makes bad products. It has a fake economy. Everything under it is hollow, right? I It seems to me that our military hardware is really going down. Let me give an example. How much do you know about the F-35?
I've heard it called a major Christmas tree that'll never fly.
Yep, the pilots say it flies like a piano. So this is the most expensive plane ever made in the history of man, and it is a piece of garbage, right? Can't fly in the rain, all this stuff, right? So, but they're selling it like crazy. And here's what I say, and people are like, "Oh, that was a disaster." I'm like, "No, it wasn't." You know how much money, of how many trillions of dollars they spent on that? It was a money laundering operation. They didn't build that plane as military hardware. They built that plane as a money laundering operation so they'd have an excuse. What are you building? The F-35. They don't care if it flies or not. They wouldn't care if it was a little piece of plastic, like the old sci-fi shows where they'd show the spaceship and you could see that it was just like a little piece of hard plastic with like a black board behind it. They could care less if the F-35 was nothing else than that. It was a money laundering operation. So if you look right now, at the kinds of money that we're spending on our military hardware, and if you start researching our military hardware, it's not the best in the world anymore. It's getting worse and worse, and it's not effective. Why? Neoliberalism doesn't they don't try to create a product that is a good product. They just want to make as much as they can. So they'll make the shoddiest product they can. They'll cut every corner they can. They'll cheat. They'll do anything they can so that they can put some kind of product out and say, there you go. There's the new F-35. Pilots get it and they're like, oh my God, this thing, I can't do anything with it. It's the worst plane I've ever flown. Shut up. We're charging, 100 to 200, $300 million a plane. You shut up and fly this plane. But if you ever really had to go against an enemy that had a real plane, you're going to get shot down. It's supposed to be, what do you call it? Stealthy. Like when you open the bomb bay doors, it's completely visible to radio. It's completely visible to radar. So if you go to drop bombs, you're done. They're going to sight you with missiles and shoot you down. It's a worthless piece of crap. And my point being, I don't know that our military really could do much anymore. Like if they faced major militaries, because I think the neoliberal, Lockheed Martins, etc., they produced a lot of shoddy military hardware, and every time it's put to the test on a battlefield, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right. I had those plastic planes when I was a kid. I was trying to think. I had a F-86, from the Korean War, and but this story about the F-35 and the pilots, reports about it. I don't know if you remember the F-111.
Yes, EF-111 was the electronic one. Yep,
and
that's what they used to bomb Libya with. F-111s, I'm pretty sure.
Well, it was used a lot in Vietnam, and they did but they were built. It was the first time I think they built military planes in it was in Texas, and it was some type of a political payoff to get the plane built there. And the only problem was it was slower than the MiGs, and so that's not really good.
No,
it was not a really effective warplane, but it got the job done. So I'm curious when you say money laundering, okay, we talking about drug money? What kind of money?
Okay, here's what I mean.
How does this work as you see it?
Here's what I mean when I say it's a money laundering operation, right? Okay, if somebody comes to you and says, look, man, I can get you a contract to make a plane. And you're like, I don't know anything about planes. That's okay. I can get you the contract. And let's say you do, but you can't come up with, you say, well, I'll just, and it's just like, just make something up. So you make something up. We're going to come up with the greatest plane ever. And you just cost overrun constantly and cost overrun. And you give yourself bonuses. You give everybody on the team bonuses. You give $1 million bonuses every 6 months to everybody on the team. Money, 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 money. Everybody's getting rich. right? And then you do more cost overruns because you are getting money from the Pentagon. And when you're like, well, we spent 100 billion, but that ain't gonna get it. We need we need another 100 billion.
So that's
Okay,
the
here you
whole.
go, boom, and you're just getting money. So it's a hole, and that money goes in, and you use it for lobbying, you use it for buying back stocks, you use it for giving everybody the CEO bonuses to, you know what I'm saying? So the plane, the whole operation was never really. It was like, well, guys, look, don't forget, we're getting all this money, and we got to produce something. So some kind of plane has to come out of this thing. But most of this money's going in our pockets. And so you just produce a piece of crap and stick it out there. And when it doesn't, and when the pilots say this thing flies like a piano, you call your senators and say, look, this plane, and the senator calls the Pentagon and says, I don't care how this plane flies, we're buying them. Okay. And like the generals are like, well, they're no good to us. Well, make them work because we're buying the planes. You see what I'm saying? Because it's about money. It's about, people making profits. It was never about, if it was about a plane in the very beginning, they'd have said, whoa, this plane ain't working. We need something different. And that's like the neoliberalism. That's the whatever globalism. You don't ever try to produce a good product. You try to make as much as you can. And any corner you can cut, the shoddiest product, the cheapest labor in the poorest country, whatever you can do, you make everything that you can. And it's hollowing our entire system out.
It's a tragedy. You're right. The banks have worked this out, and you speak of people with a state of mind in which getting people out of the way of your project is just part of it's just business. We got to get rid of these people. They're in our way. It's just business. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. And so Britain is like. We need all the food from Ireland, so we're gonna just go and take it because it's too bad about the Irish, but geez, we need the food, and they don't need it. They're just a bunch of crappies. They just sit around and smoke pipes and drink whiskey. That's just the Irish. We don't need. They're not important to the world. We're important. We need to eat. So, and then that resonates with me when we were talking about Ukraine and the idea of of supporting these neo-Nazi groups or really fascist or I don't know what the word is if you're not actually a German Nazi but you're still a Nazi, because these guys, I mean, I have read the history of it from time to time, and I went and checked on it again this afternoon before the show. And when the Second World War started, the whole Ukraine was just part of Russia. I mean, it was part of the Soviet Union. And so it wasn't an independent country. It wasn't then, maybe before World War I sometime, but let's just talk about 20th century. It was not an independent country. And the beginning of the the invasion of the Soviet Union by the Germans, they just blitzkrieged into their, 500, 600 miles right straight into Russia without hardly any resistance. And where did they go? Where did that take them? It took them right into the Ukraine. And so what did they do in the Ukraine? Well, they took all the food. Why? Because they needed it. They're the army, they got to win the war, and you can't win the war without food. So you took all the food from Ukraine. Ukraine was the breadbasket, it still is, of the whole area of Russia. So 2 or 3 million Ukrainians starved to death because they didn't have any food. That's what Nazis do. That's what's going on around the world now. And only instead of it's Nazis, it's us. And it's horrible to think, the suffering in Syria, the suffering in all around the world is something that we as citizens have got to take responsibility for and do something with our Congress to get the Mitch McConnells out of our way, to get the Schumers out of our way, and the ones that have these deep connections, and any of them that are multimillionaires. How do they do that and still call themselves public servants, enriching themselves while they're supposedly serving the country? It's a horrible situation. And these people don't have consciences, and that's the whole idea of a corporation. When you think about it, is to take the conscience away from the business. So the business runs solely on the question of how much money can I make from this venture. Now, put on top of that, the banking system has, ever since they took away Glass-Steagall, has been a money laundering paradise for dirty money, for drug money, for trafficking money, for the horrific underground economy suddenly found a way into the real economy. And so now we're faced with a situation where you have banks being run by people who have that criminal mindset, that are not against exploiting a million people if they can make a $500,000 off of it, or even less, just to keep that just to keep the churn going, the cash flow going. They will do it, whatever it takes. And this is where I think we're at right now, is that every country, every place in the world is getting squeezed, and the squeezing down of our economy is part of it in some way that I'm not sure how to describe. But and anyway, that's my soapbox entry for today.
Well, I think too, you hit the nail on the head about, as I said, the term I'd use is ultra liberalism, and don't use that to mean that it is associated with the left or associated with the right. It is a faux, it is a false liberalism. It is a lie. It is basically a form of fascism that pretends to be liberals, but they're really fascists. And there's people that pretend to be conservatives. That's the thing about fascism. I always give the example. Hitler was a right-wing fascist. Stalin was a left-wing fascist. You can go around the Idi Amin, you can find right-wing, you can find left-wing fascism. Fascism is this vicious, malignant authoritarianism, right? So they are, it's funny, I guess they consider themselves the centrists, but they're so morally bankrupt that they don't even have an ideology. But you would, I guess, call them the so-called centrist fascists. But they are bent on control, right, of the internal. Here's the thing about it. This is a fascist government is very oppressive. So one of the things it has to focus on is keeping down uprisings. Right. So that's what all of this, we've got to control what you see on television. We got to control what you can see on the internet, what you can say on the internet, who can be on Twitter, who can be on this, who has a voice. Right. That's trying to tamp down dissent, trying to tamp down uprisings. And as a fascism spins out of control generally when it comes to foreign policy, because it spreads itself too thin. And then the people in the main empire start saying, why are we so poor? And all of our money is being reached out all over the place, all over the world. People are already starting to ask that. I can't pay my bills. Why do we have 800 bases? Why are we spending so much on military, right? When that happens, fascism's like, uh-oh, we might have uprisings at home. So what do you have? Avril Haines, our new DNI, Director of National Intelligence, right? What is she saying? The problem we have now is enemies at home, and the Capitol 6 riot, the January 6 riot shows that, and we've got to stop these people. So what are they saying now? And that is, we've got to stop uprisings. We've got to focus our energy on stopping uprisings. So now basically the government's saying, I got to hold down the people because they ain't happy anymore. Well, that's what happens in an empire, a fascist empire. It's expansionist. It spins out of control into madness. The people start suffering. The people start asking questions. The people try to uprise. Now it's fighting out here because it's trying to overthrow countries and take their stuff. But it's fighting here because there's people starting to say, wait a minute, I don't like this. And they're in fear of an uprising. I think that's where we are. I think that's really where they are. That their fear is. And when we talk about, people say, oh, there'll be a race war. Nah, there'll be a race war. Oh, there'll be this kind of, people fight. No, let me tell you when things fall apart. You let that dollar crash. You let inflation go up to 50. You let somebody go to the store and they wanted $12 or $13 for a dozen eggs and $20 for a gallon of gas. You let our dollar crash like we've deliberately done to these other countries. You want to see what do you think? If you go tomorrow and we get this crazy inflation and the dollar has crashed because we've sanctioned everybody and people stop buying their stuff, and you go to the store tomorrow and people can't afford to live and a dollar ain't worth, a toilet paper. That's when you'll see an uprising. The rest of this stuff of people getting angry at each other, we'll get mad at each other. We'll push and shove a little bit. That's about it. But as far as a true uprising, you let people get hungry and things start to fall apart economically. And it looks like that's eventually going to happen. They're so reckless financially worldwide. Just dump money. The truth is, we are living in a false economy. Our stock market, entire economic structure collapsed in 2008. They never fixed it. They just keep pouring trillions of dollars in it. So it will appear as though it's alive. It's not. They're just pumping electricity into a dead body. That's what our economic system is. It's unbelievable. It's a piece of garbage. How long that can last? You can't keep doing that forever.
But if that's all there is, to quote Peggy Lee in the great song, if that's all there is, then let's keep dancing. Let's just keep spinning the roulette wheel, and some people will fly off the table, and goodbye. But the rest of us are still here, and as long as we're here, we'll just keep on dancing. That if that's all there is. And that's right. The question, isn't it? I mean, are we humans? Are we people that have God-given faculties that make us different from the rest of animal nature, or are we, the biblical type of a person that's supposed to be, made in the image of God? Or are we just flesh and bones, like the Malthusians would say, like the crazy Fabians would say? If you're not one of the enlightened ones, then you're just like cattle, you're just like sheep, and we're going to call you when we feel like calling you by any means necessary. That attitude, I think, is more than negligent. I think it's an intentional disregard for the humanity of the rest of humanity. It is racism on a huge scale. It's racism from an elite group that doesn't want to be diluted. They won't have their blood streams diluted. They don't want their. It really is a banker's dictatorship. As I think that's Harley Schlanger's word, and I think it's exactly right. Is what they want is a single one authority that's going to run everything, and everybody else just better get in line. And among that, there's going to be a division between those that are kind of in the nobility and the rest of us that are just serfs / servants / useless eaters if we're not productive. That is the model of a Malthusian, old British. And they would actually use the word liberal, because liberal means liberal trade, meaning anything goes. You can make money any way you want to, and the government has no right to interfere with it. So that tends to lead us in the same direction, whether you call it fascism. I think it's a dictator. It's like the empire. It's let's all be part of the empire again. All hail the emperor.
Dr. Sheldon Wolin, he's an interesting guy. People can find him. It's Wollin. He's interesting to watch some stuff from him on YouTube. He refers to it as inverted totalitarianism, basically where, usually in totalitarianism, you have some leader being whoever, Hitler, whoever, Napoleon, whatever, right? And this person they're the top of the pyramid, right? He said It's an inverted totalitarianism where these corporations and these oligarchs that own these corporations, they own the people at the so-called top. So instead of having a guy up here who's the fearless leader, who's over top of everybody behind him, you've got a so-called puppet president, you've got a puppet House and Senate, and underneath them, hidden is the real totalitarian rulers, which is some corporations and oligarchs, and they tell these people what to do, but they're off on the side and you can't see them. So that's an inverted totalitarianism. Meanwhile, we're underneath, and they don't the big game is the media, because we can't really know what's happening. We can't see what's happening. And now that people have YouTube shows, now that people can search online, it's simple. Now that we can find things, now that we can talk about things they don't like, they just shut us completely off and say, no, you can't do that. You know, there are people that say things that make perfectly good sense, and I'm like, wow. There's other people that say things on a lie, and I look at it and I'm like, well, that's totally nuts. But I think they should be able to say it, because you know what? People might look at me. What is Garland talking about? Some left-wing kook. He's you know what I say? If you don't like Garland and he's some left-wing kook, Garland should be able to say whatever he wants, and you should be able to switch to whatever other show you want and watch anything you want. I don't care if some guys, if it's telling you, you know, something completely bonkers. We should have a right to say what we want. And they act like they have the only truth because they know they're lying. If in fact we are all so wrong, in at least we don't even agree on everything, we just challenge the mainstream narrative, right? Like what we were doing earlier. If we're so crazy and wrong for challenging them, well, they don't have to shut our mouth. Won't it be obvious that they're right? You know, if somebody says to you, I'm a great poker player, well, they can say all they want to, but you say, all right, let's sit down and play poker, and he does real well. You say you are great. You can see it. If they're so right and they can substantiate the things that they're saying, and us challenging those narratives is madness, people should be able to watch it. And if they're so right, people will go, you know, that John and Garland, they're totally nuts. I'm going back over here to NBC News and get the truth. It'll be obvious, but they have to shut our mouths, because like what we did at the beginning of the show, perhaps it could be this, perhaps it could be that. That's a healthy discussion. That's an intellectually honest discussion where you say, let's look at the possibilities. Maybe they're geniuses. Maybe they're idiots. Maybe there's some combination of both. Who knows? But they don't want us to even have that conversation, particularly anything to do with COVID. Forget it. You're deplatformed, you know? And I mean, I've heard things that I've thought were way out there, but I've heard people that have just maybe saying things I didn't agree with, but they were questioning the mainstream narrative. That's the problem. You ain't allowed to question the mainstream narrative. And that shows you, number one, that they're controlling and fascist. And number two, that they're worried because they know they lie all the time. And the worst person for them, their biggest enemy, is the person that questions the mainstream narrative, because it's going to expose that even if we don't know the truth, we can at least expose that they're lying all the time.
Yeah, well, I think the truth is going to come out, but it might take another year or two. And I'm just holding out that we can maintain our civil liberties until the truth does come out. People are losing their civil liberties all around. I noted a comment early on in the show tonight from Hawaii saying that you need to have a vaccine passport to travel from one island to another in the state of Hawaii. That's pretty.
Somebody should challenge that.
I don't know if that's, you know, if we can confirm that or not, but that's got to be unconstitutional.
If anybody finds that out, my email is garlandn, Garland, garlandn@gmail.com. I'm at Garland Nixon on Twitter. If you find something, forward it to me. I am actually on the board of directors for the National Board of Directors for the American Civil Liberties Union. So trust me, if you get that to me, and we were we were talking about that a little bit recently at an ACLU board meeting about the issue of vaccine passports. But at any rate, so if somebody sees that, send it to me, garlandn@gmail.com. I want to see that. I agree with you. I think it's unconstitutional. I don't think this is a health issue. You can't force me, you know, it's a choice. You shouldn't be able to force me to get some kind of take some kind of a medicine on anything, because like, here's a perfect example. Whatever you think of the vaccine, there's people, I know one woman who she almost died from the flu vaccine years ago. They had to revive her. She had some kind of terrible reaction to it, and they had to take her to the hospital, and she almost died. They had to revive her, right? She ain't taking it. And her doctor said to her, well, you probably shouldn't, because we don't know what could happen after that incident. So you mean to tell me she can't fly? You know what I mean? We don't have the opportunity to make decisions for our own bodies, or our doctors make decisions and the doctor says, hey man, you shouldn't get this. Okay, whatever. But no, yeah. So that's I believe it's unconstitutional too. You have a constitutional freedom of movement, and you know, isn't it like the countries where wherever you go, let me see your papers. You know, wherever you go, you got to show somebody from the government your papers. That's totalitarianism. Because do you think like if the virus like disappeared tomorrow that they'd stop it? No, they give you a new ID and you'd have to use that one now.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of your chess player example earlier, and we were mentioning how what's going to, if the dollar goes down, if the inflation comes back, or if it's going to, if you can't afford to buy enough food for your family on a weekly basis, things get pretty bad. You can't get to work. You can't. The dollar starts going down. People are likely to get very, very angry and to take action. And my chess player response to you is, well, that's why they have to do the lockdown first. They have to find a way to get us locked down, and then to convince us that there's so many crazy people out there that they've got to come around and take everybody's guns. And it's only after they take all the guns that they're going to play the real totalitarian move, who's going to come out and say, okay, now we're in control. I think that the one thing that distinguishes America right now from other places is the generally armed situation with our Second Amendment, and the people that they're not going to give up their guns. They're just not going to give them up. So that is a big problem for those that want to collapse our dollar, because if they collapse the dollar while we're still able to join together, create militias, and own our country again as free citizens, then they're gonna lose big time. I hope that that somehow enough pressure can be put on our political leaders to avoid this warmongering that's going on. Let's talk for a minute, until we have to go, about China and the provocations in the Taiwan Straits, and why, in the context of about a month of telling us that we should stop anti-Asian hate, is going to war against China a hate crime?
You know what? I think, in my opinion, these people are really bad news. I don't think I think they're acting like they're preparing for a war in China. I think this is what they believe. They believe that, okay, the Soviet Union fell apart and we'll just stand around China and scream at them a lot, and it'll just, at some point, the government will just dissolve and we'll take over. I mean, I really don't believe that. It's not, I'll put it like this. It is not realistic to think that the United States Army can go to, or military or Navy can go to the shores of China and fight China and even stand a chance. I mean, they put 100 missiles on every ship. Okay, yeah, you got missile defenses, but you are on the coast of China. They're going to aim 100 missiles at every ship, and God knows how many torpedoes. They'd sink every one of our ships. You can best believe that. It's, if you start talking to international security experts, it's not plausible to argue that the U.S. could defend Taiwan, or that we could project the kind of power we'd need to project, 6, 7, 8,000 miles away to fight any kind of, what kind of a war would it be? Could we use ground troops? On what ground? Are we just going to send, because there are people now that are basically saying a lot of these big ships now with these hypersonic missiles, they're all floating coffins. If you got in a war, hypersonic missiles, 17,000, 10,000 miles an hour, there ain't no defense for that.
Mm-mm.
So the reality is, if a real war started and they're firing all these missiles, every one of the ships is blown out of the water in no time flat. It's going to be ugly quick. So it's a bluff. We're bluffing. We bluffed on Russia's border in Ukraine, and Russia put out this gigantic army, and we had to, the Ukrainian army had to back down. We're bluffing. So how stupid is it to bluff in a place where good and well you can't win? That's how incompetent these people are acting, and I just think they're going
to make a lot of money off it. That's all.
Well, yeah, you're right.
It's the speculators, it's the whole idea of people that have got some money that they can invest in a long shot, but then they know enough people to put together a team that can make sure that long shot comes in, and the rest of us pay for it. They have manipulated the system so that they can bet on their horse, and their horse will always win because they can fix the track.
What do you think? Here's an example. What do you think would happen if we went to war with China? Immediately, Walmart's done. Immediately, all of the stores, all the stuff that you see on these shelves everywhere, empty. Everywhere, empty. All of Bill Gates and all those guys that have all of those big Chinese factories and Nike and all done. All of these oligarchs flat broke. All of their money gone. So they don't really want to do that. Look, for all the blame in China, they got rich off of China. They literally got rich off of cheap labor. These oligarchs made their billions directly off of Chinese labor. And now they're pretending like they want to go to law. They're still making the money off of Chinese labor, buying the parts, doing everything off of Chinese labor, as we pretend like we want to attack China. If we did, our economy would no longer exist. I mean, theirs would hurt. We're their number one trading partner. But the idea that what are the people of America going to do if they wake up tomorrow and they're like, hey, I can't get any tires for my car, and why is it that there's nothing on the shelves and I can't buy food? What about clothes? Can't get into those. All the products you used to get and you can't. What are you going to get? Your shelves are bare everywhere.
I don't know the answer.
Right. Right. So I don't really believe they want war with China. They're acting like it's a money laundering operation to set up for war. Think how much it costs to set up for war with China. People are making billions, hundreds of billions, but they don't really want the war. They just want to set up and launder the money out.
Yeah, and the Bidens have been making money in China just like they have in Ukraine, and it's just disgusting to think of our president being part of this family that has been exploiting the foreign policy of the United States, and putting lives in danger, and really playing that horrible game that we've been talking about, where it's just a matter of who makes money, and it's all business. Sorry guys, sorry people of Libya, Yemen, Syria, Palestine. It's just business. It's a terrible attitude, and it's one of the anti-American things that somehow has survived in this country, and especially in the ruling class, the bankers' dictatorship. That's the goal. I think we agree on that, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we preserve our freedoms and try to turn our government back towards the goals of our founding fathers and the goals of our great presidents like Lincoln and Kennedy and so many others that really did want to make the world a better place.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's been great. I think we had another great session, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't know if we hashed anything out, but I think we made some sense and had fun with our friends on the in the comment section.
Thank you so much again, and yeah, the back and forth is fun, and I think people do enjoy hearing us when we don't always see the same thing same way, and that's interesting. All right, thanks everybody. Good night.